So nutrition for weight loss, week one, where to begin. So this is the idea of today, where to start sort of on a nutrition journey, essentially, for supporting weight loss. So one thing I always think is really important to understand about weight gain is that I believe weight gain is a combination of genetic predisposition, which is there, but also the food environment that we live in. And there's a lot of research sort of with evidence for this, and a lot of really good books on the topic as well that I've read over the years. So our weight gain is our body's natural response to our food environment, because food companies have taken over producing our food for us, and they have reduced the protein and fiber content of our food, which will be very important. As you'll see, we're going to talk a lot about the importance of protein and fiber. They've added more sugar and fat than we would normally use in our own cooking. So this food environment that we live in, which is really hard to avoid, is a real environment that drives weight gain. We live in a time of plenty. We were never designed to miss a meal. We never need to miss a meal, for example, and our bodies aren't designed for this. Empty calories and processed foods are everywhere, and healthier foods are often more expensive, especially now, than processed foods. That's always been true, but it's very, very true now. It's very hard to eat healthy. So what are we going to cover week one? The fundamentals of healthy weight loss. So we want to understand the fundamental rules that we need to follow to promote and also maintain long-term weight loss. And I think that's really important. You want this to be a sustained and manageable weight loss program. Any weight loss program has to be sustainable long-term. That's fundamental. So in all of the research that they've done over the years on different types of diets, the ones that are most successful are the ones that you can stick to. They're not the ones that leave you starving. They're not the ones that are super expensive. They are the ones that are sustainable. That's the main thing. We want to understand how to lose weight, but also ensure that we're eating a nutrition and balanced diet that provides key nutrients for reproductive health. And I think that's really important because, you know, not only are we trying to focus on losing weight, we're trying to get our bodies in a really good place for reproductive health and fertility. So we're going to look at how we can manage appetite with high satiety foods, really just filling foods, how we can cut out empty calories, understand what a balanced plate looks like, and understand also weight loss approaches that are not ideal for reproductive health, no matter what anyone has told you or social media indicates. So first off, I think it's really important to understand that women, especially when they're trying to conceive, should avoid very low carb diets. They do offer benefits such as rapid weight loss, and they are less likely to leave you hungry because inevitably you start to eat a lot of things like meat and maybe sort of high protein foods when you're on a very low carb diet. So it's a very high protein diet. However, very low carb diets we know are not ideal for female fertility because low carb intake has been shown to inhibit regular ovulation. So, you know, it's a general rule for women in general, we shouldn't have very, very low carb diets. And we know that women on ketogenic diets, and I have met women who are trying to conceive following ketogenic diets in the past, are known to often develop irregular menstrual cycles. Again, these diets are not ideal for women and they do not have a positive impact on your ovulation and your fertility. I also don't recommend counting calories, and it is very difficult if you have been following a counting calorie approach. I know it can be very difficult and scary to move away from. And perhaps when you were advised by a doctor that you had to lose weight to qualify for fertility treatment, you were maybe given a leaflet for Slimming World. But it's really important to avoid very low calorie diets as your weight loss method when you're trying to conceive. For a start, counting calories doesn't take into account the nutritional value of foods. So you might be avoiding a lot of very nutrient-dense foods because they're high calorie. But interestingly, a lot of these nutrient-dense foods are known to directly support fertility health, like nuts and avocado. You know, you're cutting out a lot of these really essential nutrients for fertility, like vitamin E, vitamin D, for example, whenever you cut out these foods. We also know that reduced calorie intake actually reduces your production of thyroid hormones. So your body responds to a very low calorie diet by reducing production of thyroid hormones, and thyroid hormones are very, very important for fertility health. And we know that very low calorie diets are harmful for women's fertility and can shut down ovulation. Even if you are currently overweight, eating low calories will shut down your ovulation. So, for example, a lot of people might be advised to cut down to 1,200 calories. That's a very common sort of weight loss approach. And that is not enough for the body. That's enough energy for the body to ovulate. Fasting is another commonly recommended approach. Again, there's a lot of information out there, and there's a lot of different fasting approaches that are sort of recommended. Is it sort of the 5-2 diet, the 16-8 diet? And it's been shown to, have other benefits, not just weight loss, shown to reduce inflammation, maybe improve things like insulin sensitivity, all interestingly key for fertility health. However, most of the benefits the research on the benefits of fasting have actually been conducted in men, not women. So that's a really important thing to understand. And women fasting can actually interfere with ovulation, and also lead to increased cortisol levels. And cortisol is the stress hormone that we know, and we're going to look at a lot more detail in week 3. It's not good for your weight balance, but also cortisol has a really bad impact on your fertility and reproductive health. So fasting, again, might not be an ideal approach when you're trying to get pregnant, trying to optimize your reproductive health. So I don't believe in calorie counting for a few reasons, and this is why a calorie is not just a calorie. And I tend not to recommend calorie counting for any clients, but especially not my fertility clients. Because calories have different impacts on the body depending on the type of food that they come from, and we're going to look at that in a bit more detail tonight. So counting calories has limited benefits, both for your weight balance and for your overall health. Somebody once said, and I don't know who it was, but I think it's a really good quote, focusing on the calorie content of food alone is like considering a book by the number of its pages, not by the information that's inside it. Depending on the type of food we get calories from, we will absorb a different amount of calories. For example, a handful of nuts will give you a very different amount of calories. You'll absorb a very different amount of calories from that than if you had a big spoonful of peanut butter. Because think about that, those nuts, you can't chew them down to a point where you're going to absorb all those calories. There's going to be some residue that's not broken down in your mouth, in your stomach, or in your gut. And that's called caloric availability. So it's complicated. It's not just about reading the calorie content on the back of a packet and going, oh, if I eat a handful of this, it's going to give me 150 calories, because it is a lot more complicated than that. Calories from different types of food actually take more energy to digest and break down. This is called the thermic effect of food. So whenever you take that into account, certain foods, because they take so much energy to break down, actually you significantly reduce the amount of calories that you absorb from them. And calories from different types of food actually impact our hunger hormones and hormones such as insulin in different ways. For example, calories from protein suppress hunger hormones, whereas calories from carbs or sugar will probably not. So just when you see all these different factors come into play, it maybe helps you understand that, a MyFitnessPal app is not going to help you, it's not going to be accurate in helping you track your calories. So this is maybe something you've seen. It's something that is definitely used in something like a Slimming World leaflet, or sort of a Weight Watchers sort of approach, where a gram of protein has 4 calories, a gram of carbs has 4, a gram of fat has 9, and alcohol has 7. But it is a lot more complicated than this. Okay, so it's not just as simple as 1 gram of protein will give you 4 calories. Because, as I said, the thermic effect of food is something that we want to take into account. And this measures how much different foods actually require us to expend energy to break them down, to digest and break them down. So think about foods that actually take a lot of chewing, take a lot of work to break down in our stomach, maybe take a lot of work to break down in our intestine. The higher the thermic effect of that food, then the more energy it takes to metabolize, so you actually reduce the amount of calories that you're going to absorb from that food. So here we see fat has a relatively low thermic effect, 0 to 3%. So whenever you eat 100 calories of fat, you're probably going to absorb around 100 calories of that fat. You're not going to expend too many calories in the breakdown. Carbs have 5 to 10% of a thermic effect, saying that you will use up about 5 to 10% of the calories in that food to break it down. Where interestingly, and this is a really interesting thing, protein has a thermic effect of 20 to 30%. So say, for example, this chicken breast that you see in the picture, if that had, say, for example, 350 calories, it's a small chicken breast, you would use between 20 and 30% of those calories to actually break that down and digest it. So you're going to significantly reduce the amount of calories, but it's still going to pass through your digestive system, and leave you feeling full. So really important factors to take into account when we think about calories and the types of food that we're choosing to base our diet around. So don't blindly count calories. Every calorie is equal, but all foods have different caloric availability. So for example, those 100 calories of sugar require no digestion. They're going straight into your bloodstream. Those 100 calories of sweet corn, you will know when you eat sweet corn, not all of it gets broken down, so you don't actually release all the calories from your sweet corn. And your corn tortillas, that corn has been ground down and processed in a certain way that you're actually going to absorb a bit more of those calories. So just I just wanted to sort of highlight this, that it isn't a straightforward, this has 100 calories, I'm going to absorb 100 calories. It's a lot more complicated than that. And processed foods, for example, have a very, very high caloric availability. So as I said, when you process corn, you grind it, you break it down, you create it into corn tortillas or tortilla chips. That is, you've processed the corn in a way that you're going to actually absorb a lot more of the calories. Processed foods, just think about them. So processed foods, for example, things like breakfast cereal, crisps, Pringles are the top example of processed foods, you know, fizzy drinks, white bread, all these foods that have been processed have hardly any they have hardly any thermic effect because it takes very little work for our digestive system to break them down. So their caloric availability is high, meaning that a processed food meal that say has 500 calories has a very high, you're going to absorb pretty much all of those 500 calories compared to a whole food meal that you've maybe produced yourself at home. You're going to absorb a lot less of those 500 calories because it's a whole food. It's going to have more fiber, more protein. It's going to take a lot more work to break down. So this is where this relationship between processed food and weight gain comes in, is that it's got very low thermic effect and very high caloric availability. So the calories from a processed meal are going to be much more damaging than the calories from a whole food home cooked meal. So one thing I wanted to really focus on, so, you know, how do we start to apply these principles and these things that we know about caloric availability, foods that make us feel fuller for longer, and actually put together a weight loss program and a healthy diet that takes it into account. So one thing I always focus on with every client who comes to me to try to lose weight is the satiety index. And this is an index that rates foods on how full they leave you, how long they leave you feeling full. So one of the first steps in achieving weight loss is regulating appetite. And as I said earlier, you want to have a weight loss approach. You want to be eating a weight loss diet that you can manage, that you actually feel good on. You don't want to be starving all the time. You don't want to be craving food. You don't want to be skipping meals. So this is where the satiety index comes in, because you're focusing on foods that will fill you up, leave you feeling fuller for longer. Therefore, it is these are types of foods that you can manage to eat all the time and be comfortable and be happy. So many low-calorie approaches can leave you feeling hungry, and they're difficult to stick to. And they're also going to leave you more anxious and irritable as well. And when you're anxious and irritable, you're going to grab a chocolate bar because you feel stressed. Why do eggs on toast fill you up, but you can easily eat a family-sized packet of crisps? The answer is satiety, the feeling of fullness that a food gives you. And by focusing on satiety, you naturally eat less and you snack less between meals because you don't feel hungry. And we can choose to include high satiety foods to naturally regulate our eating habits and avoid low satiety foods that will cause us to overeat and leave us feeling hungry. Again, snack quickly and then snacking between meals. So focusing on high satiety foods is a really great first step, in my opinion. So this is a bit of a graph that shows you high satiety versus low satiety foods. So at the top here, we've got things like fruits and vegetables, meats, whole grains. At the bottom, very low satiety foods, we've got obviously all your processed foods, sugars, refined carbs, and even some of the fruits that are a bit like faster release as well. So high satiety foods that you can fill up on and base your diet around are things like oats, for example, starting the day with porridge or oat cakes, beans and lentils, whole grains, potatoes, boiled or baked, are actually a really great high satiety food. So the potatoes aren't as bad as we've been made to think. Meat, poultry and fish, so your high protein meals, very dense proteins and things like meat, poultry and fish. Greek yogurt and low fat dairy. Vegetables because of the fiber content. Fruit, especially bananas and apples, have been shown to be really filling, and eggs. So these are the foods that I generally recommend we start to look at basing our diet around on a high satiety diet. So high satiety foods tend to be either high in fiber or high in protein. And what's really interesting is foods that are high in fiber, high protein, take a lot of work for our gut to digest. Even think about really high fiber foods, they even take a lot of work to chew in your mouth. And that's a sign, anything that takes a lot of work to chew is a sign that that is a food that's going to be high satiety. It's going to take a lot of work to break down. And also because it'll pass through your gut more slowly, leave you feeling fuller for longer. So high protein foods, for example, things like eggs, you can even consider protein powder. I include that because I know some people maybe are vegetarian or vegan. Low fat dairy, for example, 0% Greek yogurt. And I'm not really afraid of fat, but I put low fat dairy because you'll often find the lower the fat, the dairy, the higher the protein, which makes it higher protein. So makes you feel fuller for longer generally. Meat, poultry, fish, all your lean proteins are really high satiety. And beans and lentils. And I've highlighted beans and lentils because they belong both to the high protein group and the high fiber group. So they're really that double benefit of the high satiety. They've got both protein and fiber, but also your oats and whole grains, potatoes with skin or boiled potatoes, fruits and vegetables, or nuts and seeds are all really great high satiety foods. And why high protein diets work. So, we see a lot of talk online about sort of eating lots of protein, and having a high protein diet is going to be beneficial for weight loss for a number of reasons. Number one, we've mentioned it has low caloric availability due to increased thermic effect. It takes a lot of work for your gut to break down protein. Think of things like a steak. Think of a chicken breast. That takes a lot of work to break down. It's high satiety, so leaves you feeling fuller for longer because it's taken a lot of work to break down. A high protein diet suppresses levels of hunger hormones. So the more protein you actually have lower levels of a hunger hormone called ghrelin, which we're going to talk a little bit about in week 3. So, this direct relationship. Protein also keeps blood sugar stable. So incorporating protein into a meal actually slows and keeps the release of blood sugar from that meal and steadies the release of blood sugar. So we're going to talk a lot about blood sugar next week. So that reduces hunger and sugar cravings. And in the long run, protein supports lean muscle maintenance and development. So if you're exercising, you're doing resistance training, the more lean protein you have in your diet, you're going to maintain lean muscle mass. And the more lean muscle you have in your body, the more metabolically healthy your body becomes naturally. There's a really interesting doctor who focuses a lot on the importance of having a really good muscle mass in our bodies. And she said, if, years ago, we were encouraged to build muscle instead of try to lose fat, we would all be healthier, because if you build muscle, you naturally become more metabolically healthy and your body naturally burns more fat. And I think that's a really important thing to understand about sort of our bodies and what we should maybe be focusing on and thinking about. What about Ozempic? So this is a real key issue, and I know some people have been emailing me, clients who are maybe trying to lose weight or have been maybe recommended Ozempic by their doctor, and they want to know, is it suitable? With regards to fertility health, we know that Ozempic is not advised for anyone who is trying to get pregnant or could become pregnant in the future. Women who are using Ozempic are advised to use contraception because there's been no studies whatsoever to know what the negative impact could be on pregnancy. We also know that Ozempic has a negative impact on the gut microbiome, which is very important for our overall health and our weight balance. So we're going to talk a little bit about gut microbiome as the weeks go on as well. It's a really important area, in my opinion, for overall health and for your reproductive health. And with Ozempic, what's really interesting is Ozempic actually works on the brain to turn off your hunger signal. It isn't actually firing up your metabolism so much or anything like that. It's actually working on the brain. And if you're significantly eating less food, you're also significantly taking in less nutrients. And I think that's a really important thing to bear in mind. Reduced calorie intake, reduced food intake equals reduced nutrient intake. And with reproductive health, you really want to be optimizing your nutrient intake as much as possible. So Ozempic is called a GLP-1 inhibitor, which means it binds to GLP-1 receptors. And GLP-1 is a hormone that's produced by the gut, and it's usually produced in the gut after we eat. and it tells your brain to turn off those hunger signals. So basically, when you have Ozempic in your system, it's basically always telling your brain that you've just eaten. So then your hunger signals break down. What I find is really interesting is that there is something that is present naturally in foods called resistant starch. And we know that it actually acts like Ozempic in the body. Now, I'm not going to claim that it is as strong as Ozempic injections, but it works by a similar mechanism to really support sort of weight balance. And resistant starch is a special type of fiber that promotes satiety. And it's what's really interesting, it's a type of starch that cannot be broken down in our gut. So foods that are very high in resistant starch, we don't break them down completely. So then if you think about it, they've got poor caloric availability as well. So resistant starch travels to the large intestine where it is fermented by our good bacteria. So here we go. Here's the role of our gut microbiome coming in there. So when we have a meal that's very rich in resistant starch, it slows the digestion of your meal. So your meal releases energy much more slowly and stabilizes appetite. So think about a meal very rich in resistant starch. Because our gut can't break it down very easily, all of that meal gets broken down very, very slowly, and your energy from that meal gets very, very gradually released into your bloodstream. It also increases levels of the hormone GLP-1, the one that Ozempic increases. And what's really interesting is the more resistant starch we have in our diet long term, it has been shown to improve metabolism and insulin sensitivity. And that's something we're going to look at in detail next week, how we can eat for insulin sensitivity and blood sugar balance. So foods that are really, this is just a little bit of a diagram about GLP-1. It slows down your stomach emptying. It turns off the hunger signals in the brain. It improves your insulin sensitivity. Increases glucose uptake into muscle, so it can support muscle mass. So lots of really good roles of the GLP-1. And these are where you can get the resistant starch in your diet. So, for example, anyone who's ever eaten plantain curry, which is absolutely delicious, or had plantain chips, or even eaten green bananas, they are a really rich source of resistant starch. Nigella Lawson, who I love, also has a banana skin curry recipe. It's online if you ever want to see it. There's a video of her making it. And banana skins are also a really good source of resistant starch too. And potatoes that have been cooked and then cooled. So, and then you can either eat those potatoes cool, or you can then recook them, and that resistant starch is still there. So what I do whenever I buy my potatoes, especially like maybe the little baby potatoes, I bring them home, I cook them straight away. Then I leave them in the fridge to go, or I leave them to go cold, put them in the fridge. And I will either eat those cold as like maybe a potato salad with some olive oil, or we can then cook them. And that is a really good way to cook your potatoes for better sort of increasing the resistant starch content of them. The same happens with rice if you cook it and then cool it. So again, you can either eat it cold or you can reheat it. However, if you are going to reheat rice, please follow all the food safety guidelines of making sure that you cool it very safely, you're spreading it out so that because rice can become quite dangerous if you cool it down too quickly. And when it's reheated, you want to reheat it very, very thoroughly because it can be a source of bacteria for food poisoning. Oats are a great source of resistant starch, and barley. So if you happen to like things like, rice bowls or kind of rice salads or even bulgur wheat salads, try swapping out those grains for barley, and it's really, really rich in resistant starch. Beans and lentils, again, the health benefits of beans and lentils keep coming back. High protein, high fiber, high resistant starch. Rye bread is fantastic. And the humble pea, peas, petit pois, frozen peas, fantastic to add into any meal as a source of resistant starch. And nuts, especially cashews and walnuts. So a handful of walnuts, absolutely fantastic source of resistant starch. So we're sort of starting to build a picture of, foods that we want to build our diet around. So low calorie foods are often low satiety. So look at the rice cake. That lovely rice grain has been processed in a way that it is no longer high satiety. It is now a low satiety food, because if you take that rice cake in your mouth and take a bite and hold it in your mouth, it's going to dissolve. That's a sign of a low satiety, fast release food. It doesn't take any digestion. Do you often find yourself filling up on things like low calorie foods like rice cakes, Snack-a-Jacks, fiber 1 bars? because they're low calorie, but they're also low satiety. They don't leave you filling up. So those, say, for example, 100 calories of rice cakes or a Fibre One bar are not going to leave you feeling full for very long. And in actual fact, you're probably going to be more hungry afterwards. They're fast release, okay? So after a short period of time after you've eaten them, you're going to be really hungry again. And what are the low satiety foods that you want to avoid? So not only do we want to base our diet around high satiety foods, we want to avoid low satiety foods. So obviously anything that's processed, but you know, this could be even foods that appear healthy. You know, like a lot of breakfast cereals appear healthy, but they're low satiety, you know, Special K, and even a lot of the whole grains. Again, think of a bowl of breakfast cereal. When it's in that milk and it's already started to dissolve, that's a sign of a processed food. Crackers, biscuits, white bread, breakfast cereals, potato crisps, mashed potatoes. So it's really interesting. The potato, depending on how you cook it, can become either a low satiety food or a high satiety food. Mashed potatoes, unfortunately, is the worst way to eat your potatoes. Chips, French fries, however, get your potatoes, cook them, let them go cold, keep the skin on, and then recook them as potato wedges, and you've got a higher satiety choice of your potatoes. Obviously, your sweets are low satiety, you know, refined carbs, lots of sugar, ice cream, and then even, you know, things that are sort of marketed as healthy, like energy bars, some protein bars, breakfast biscuits, all those things. So if you continue to eat processed foods, weight loss will likely be slower because they're low satiety, and also we've talked about how they've got a very high caloric availability. You know, you absorb almost all the calories that are available there. So filling up on high satiety foods is what I really want to recommend we focus on over the next 4 weeks. And it's a natural way to regulate our appetite. And try to include some foods from high satiety list at every meal. And if you can, include 2 to 3 of these foods at each meal. That's going to be even better. For example, oats, a high satiety food, mixed with Greek yogurt, the 0% high protein Greek yogurt, and nuts, for example, walnuts, or a baked potato with the skin. And if you've pre-cooked the baked potato, then done it, that's even better. Then with tuna and lots of salad veg, you know, you've got your protein, your slow release from the baked potato, and you've got your salad, so for all the fiber. Those are really ideal meals to be thinking about and filling up on. So just a few breakfast ideas that you might like. For example, porridge with added protein powder, then topped with a serving of fruit. You can even add some nuts or seeds there as well. Overnight oats made with 0% Greek yogurt, and then you can add in maybe a bit more fruit, seeds again. Eggs on rye toast. Again, eggs, really high satiety food. Oat pancakes, so pancakes made with oats, and I've got a lovely oat cottage cheese pancake recipe that I'll email through as well. Eggs with a black bean salsa, so you know, maybe going towards a savory breakfast. I find it hugely works for me for being much more high satiety. And I always say to clients when we're talking about, you know, blood sugar balance, weight loss, I would say, you know, because a lot of people during the week will have these fast release breakfasts like jam on toast or breakfast cereal, and then the weekend they'll often have a cooked breakfast. Maybe it's eggs and bacon or turkey bacon, or, you know, you'll make an omelette or something. And I always ask my clients, you know, how do you feel at the weekend when you maybe have brunch? You know, because often most clients will say to me, well, actually, I don't really want anything until dinner time. And I say, well, that's because you've had a high satiety, high protein breakfast at the weekend. You know, you can almost skip lunch because you're feeling so much fuller for longer, and your hunger hormones are so much better regulated because of the way you started the day. Even things like sugar-free beans, and you could even make these yourself on sourdough toast. So really good ideas for how to start the day there. Snack ideas. Now, what I do say to people is actually if you start the day with high satiety foods, or even have like high satiety lunch and dinners, you shouldn't find yourself snacking as much. But these are all good ideas. So your Greek yogurt again, and berries, a piece of fruit combined with a handful of nuts. That would be my go-to whole food snack. Veg sticks with hummus, oat cakes with cottage cheese, and you could add a bit of cucumber or, you know, peppers on top of that if you liked. There's a company called Brave that do roasted beans and chickpeas, which would be my kind of go-to snack if I'm grabbing a packet. Or even something like Rivita with a mackerel pate or tuna on it would also be a lovely high satiety snack as well. Lunches, again, the humble baked potato really is my go-to. Rye bread open sandwich with chicken or tuna and salad. You know, a soup made with vegetable, beans, lentils, and 1 slice of whole grain bread. You could even add barley to that soup for some more resistant starch. A barley grain bowl, pasta salad made with lentil or chickpea pasta. Even cold pasta has resistant starch as well, which I realized I didn't mention. So if you do love pasta and you miss it, you know, whenever you're maybe sort of trying to lose weight, I always say to people, have your pasta, but eat it cold as a salad at lunchtime. Tuna and white bean salad would be really great. Or my real go-to, if I'm really busy and don't have time, I would get like a tub of hummus, some Rivita or oat cakes, and some chopped raw veg. And that's a really great, easy, quick lunch, you know, if you're working from home or you're at work and you need to run into the supermarket and quickly grab a few things. That's what I would go to. And then dinner, like a bean chili with brown rice, curry with chickpeas, falafels, fish, baby boiled potatoes, vegetables, potato wedges, turkey burger, coleslaw, stir fry with whole grain noodles, or a Spanish style omelette, with a side salad and dressing your side salad in olive oil. So just a few ideas there. And we want to cut out the empty calories. We've talked a lot about how processed foods are empty calories, but what I wanted to also highlight is, you know, with reproductive health, we are trying to optimize nutrition, get our bodies as healthy as possible, you know, for conception and then ideally for pregnancy as well. And, you know, these processed French fries, they're 323 calories, but absolutely no macronutrients. This handful of broccoli, 32 calories, but also look at all the nutrients that it's also going to provide you. So watching out for empty calories in your diet, things like liquid calories, you know, fizzy drinks, energy drinks, soft drinks, sugar added to tea or coffee, ice cream, breakfast cereals, fast food. So they're foods that are going to give you calories, but not really any nutrition alongside it. So always think of, you know, oh, yes, this might be a high calorie meal, but look at all the nutrients it's giving me. This might be a high calorie snack when I'm eating my handful of nuts, but what are the nutrients it's giving me as well? And watch out for healthy processed foods. This is one of my biggest kind of bugbears, is these kind of foods that claim to be healthy. But when you look at the ingredients, they're really not. And often they're quite highly processed, fast release, and they don't really fill you up. So things like Fiber One bars, most protein bars are not great. Nature Valley bars, lentil or quinoa chips, you know, yes, they once had a lot of fiber in them, but not now when they've been processed. So, and often when you look at the ingredients on those, they've got a lot of vegetable oils, which are very pro-inflammatory, which is something you don't want. So try not to be fooled by these healthy snacks. I mean, if you love lentil chips, you know, keep going, have them, but have them once a week as a proper treat, as you would possibly have a normal packet of potato chips. Don't be fooling yourself that you can have a packet every day and it's going to be healthy. And processed foods, the opposite of high satiety foods. So this was a really interesting clinical trial that they did with 20 people divided in two. 2 weeks, one half. 2 weeks, one half of the group ate only processed foods and the other group ate whole foods. The meals were matched for calories, sugar, fiber, fat, and carbohydrates, and then they swapped over. Participants could eat as much or as little as they wanted. On the processed diet, participants ate faster, consumed about 500 calories more in a day, and gained on average 2 pounds in 2 weeks. So there you go. You know, that's the example of not only did they eat more calories because there was low satiety, but they were gaining weight because the caloric availability of that food was so high. On the whole food, unprocessed diet, the participants lost on average 2 pounds. So that was, you know, they could eat as much as they want, but it was all whole food. It lost on average 2 pounds a week, and they were eating around 500 calories less a day than the people that were eating the processed food. So I think that's just a really interesting thing. So, you know, even if you just say, I'm going to just start cooking for myself from scratch, you know, you'll save a lot of money too. That is the number one thing we can start to do. So what would be the rules to follow over the next 4 weeks? So rule 1, try to eat only whole foods, not empty calories. Focus on eliminating all sources of empty calories over the coming months, basing your diet around whole foods, and eliminating those empty calories like alcohol, soft drinks. Just one thing that I really have to stress is that soft drinks, especially the calorie-free ones, again, that a lot of people really get hooked on. So like Diet Coke, Coke Zero, etc. Those artificial sweeteners that are in there are often really bad news for your gut microbiome. There's also a lot of evidence that some of them can damage DNA, which is really, really harmful, in my opinion, for your reproductive health. So even if you're cutting out soft drinks, as in normal Coke, don't be swapping it for a Coke Zero. Maybe go for something like a Dash fizzy water or a kombucha or something instead. And one exception to the rule is plain dark chocolate. Maybe 80-85% cocoa content. It's very nutritious, and lowered sugar than milk chocolate, and it's actually a really good source of antioxidants and magnesium. So that's the one rule, exception to the rule. There's exception to every rule in nutrition. And start the day with a high protein meal. So again, I know sometimes sort of whenever you're trying to focus on weight loss and fertility, it can be overwhelming. You know I'm sharing a lot of information there with you tonight. So I always say to people, if you want to do one thing, start with one change, start with a high protein meal at breakfast, and counting up to maybe 20 to 30 grams of protein at breakfast is a really good way to see a beneficial effect for the rest of the day. You'll be benefiting your metabolism, you'll be balancing your hunger hormones, you'll be supporting muscle mass development if you're exercising, you'll be keeping your blood sugar stable. Also, you can support hormone balance as well, eating enough protein first thing in the day. So if you think, do you know what, this is a lot of info, but I'm just going to start for the next week before we meet again next week, I'm just going to have a high protein breakfast every single day. Within a week, I guarantee you'll start to see a difference in things like your energy levels, your cravings for sugar, your cravings for caffeine, your cravings for snacks, your 3 p.m. slump, if you just want to start to do the high protein breakfast. And I'll be sending through some ideas for that as well. Drink water, so don't drink your calories. If you can, try and just reach for plain water or fizzy water or herbal tea or unsweetened tea. That is a really key way to support weight loss. And also making sure you're properly hydrated is a really natural appetite suppressant as well. And as I said, calorie-free drinks do not count. And this is the last thing I really want to focus in on, is the Eat Well plate. So instead of counting calories, moving to a high satiety whole food approach to eating, how do you know that your plate is balanced? You want to avoid empty calories. And we also make sure we're getting the foods that support fertility. So how do you get a properly balanced meal, say at lunch and dinner, to make sure you're getting the right proportion of every food group? Okay, so this is the plate that I work with pretty much every client. I think it's just a great rule to understand. So whenever you're sitting down to lunch, dinner, or if you're having a savory breakfast, this would also apply there. You want to sort of think of your plate like a clock. Half of that clock should be filled up with vegetables, especially non-starchy vegetables. For example, all of your green leafy veg, your salad veg, your green beans, your broccoli, your cabbage, all of those should be filling up half of your plate. A quarter of your plate should come from protein, and a quarter of your plate should be covered with carbs. So think about some meals that might really skew these ratios, like a big bowl of pasta, big bowl of risotto, a pizza, a burger and fries. And then think about how the easy ways are that you can maybe apply these rules. So for example, maybe you're having a bowl of pasta with a bolognese sauce. Maybe you reduce the amount of that meal that is pasta, and you make yourself a big large side salad on the side. So trying to think of these ratios when you eat lunch and when you eat dinner is going to make sure that every meal is balanced. And also you're going to get lots of antioxidants from the fruit and veg, which are key for fertility as well. So fill up half your plate with non-starchy veg. So it's going to give you lots of high fiber foods and also lots of antioxidants that support fertility. A quarter of your plate should be protein. So example, eggs, meat, fish, or chicken. That means sure you're getting protein at every meal. And a quarter of the plate should be filled with carbohydrates. For example, brown rice, brown pasta, potatoes with the skin, noodles. And that's enough to meet your energy needs. So you're not on a low carb diet, but you're also not having a carb dominated meal that's going to spike your blood sugar. So how do you put this all together? Best each meal around the high satiety foods and have 2 to 3 at each meal. Start with a high protein breakfast, even a savory breakfast. I even say to people, even if you like, say, for example, you usually have porridge at breakfast and maybe you have a chicken salad wrap at lunch, swap that chicken salad wrap to breakfast time and then have your porridge at lunch or something if you want. Maybe not so handy if you're in the office, but if you're working from home, and just even do that for a few days and just see how you feel. Cut out low satiety foods and empty calories. Drink only water. Aim to drink at least 500 ml bottle of water daily. It doesn't have to be 2 liters or 3 liters, people. 500 mils is already good for hydration, together with maybe tea, coffee, and herbal tea. And base your meal ratios around the Eat Well plate. So with the Eat Well plate, you can apply those ratios if you're having a takeaway, if you go out to eat, or if you're cooking meals for more than one person. You can still apply those ratios to your plate. Okay, and as I said, take it one step at a time. You don't have to do everything perfectly from day one. We're going to be building this up over the next 4 weeks, and there's going to be plenty of support over the next 4 weeks to help you as well. So the weeks ahead, as I mentioned at the start in our intro, we want to look at a few things that are maybe a bit more specific. So this has been quite a generalized approach today, but we're going to maybe look at specific blood markers and whether levels are optimal. And this might come up quite a bit. Maybe next week we're going to talk about blood sugar. Week 3, we're going to talk about different hormones and how they could be out of balance. That could be affecting your weight balance. So these are markers that I like to check for all my clients. So for example, all my fertility clients, I want to look at blood sugar and insulin sensitivity. So I want to know their HbA1c level. That's a really important marker of your insulin sensitivity, and also could be relevant for your for weight balance. Your vitamin D status, really important for your insulin sensitivity, also really key for your reproductive health. I really think it's important to optimize your vitamin D, and it's a very straightforward way to support your fertility. ALT, which are your liver enzymes. These can actually, if those are elevated, they can actually have a significant impact on your ability to lose weight and your insulin sensitivity. So it's really important to know those, and they will definitely be done on a very standard blood test. Your thyroid health, and this is a big thing that I see with clients who maybe have come to see me, maybe they've already had a few failed rounds of IVF, and I always screen, I do a full thyroid panel with all my clients. And a few times I have found elevated thyroid antibodies in clients who have had failed IVF and no one's ever checked them because their TSH or their T4, which are your standard thyroid hormone measures, were coming back normal. But you can have elevated thyroid antibodies. It could be affecting your weight balance. It could be affecting your fertility, and it's never been checked. So that is something that can be quite straightforward to get checked. When I email through the documents, I'll email a link to a really good kit that you can buy, which is quite cheap, that you could do this test at home potentially, because GPs generally don't do the antibody screen. And if, especially if anyone is on the call and you have a family history of thyroid disorders, your mum or your aunts or your granny, do screen your thyroid. It's really, really important. And your ferritin levels, often overlooked, really key for fertility. They also play a really important role in your thyroid health. And your ferritin levels can be normal, but they may not be optimal for fertility and reproductive health. And especially if you're someone who suffers from heavy periods, you could be at risk of low ferritin. So if over the next few weeks you've got time, you want to either do some of these blood tests yourself or see a GP and maybe get a full blood count, I'll be able to answer any questions either on the chats here or via email. So if you want to have a look at all these, if this is something you think could be relevant for you, we can definitely look at this in a bit more detail over the coming weeks. So now I've got time for questions. This is my contact detail. I'll be emailing you tomorrow anyway, so you don't really need to take these down. That is a QR code for my Instagram, where I sometimes share videos and recipes in addition to the recipes that I'm going to send out. And then even some of the recipes I'm sending you out, you might see a video of them on my Instagram.